Welcome to episode 284 of Sports Geek. On this week's CEO Series episode, I chat with Netball Queensland CEO, Catherine Clark.
Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host who's waiting for the call for Spotify to acquire the podcast, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. Yes, my name is Sean Callanan. You can find the podcast. You might be listening to the podcast on Spotify. It would be great if some of those Spotify dollars that have been splashed around to Bill Simmons and Joe Rogan came Sports Geek's way. But until then, it is available on every single platform. It might be on Apple Podcasts. It might be on Google Podcasts. It might be on your Alexa. It is definitely on sportsgeekhq.com. It's also available on my favourite podcast app, Pocket Casts. So I appreciate you listening and appreciate you if you are also a subscriber to the Sports Geek news. Comes out each week. You can sign up for that at sportsgeekhq.com/SGN. That allows you to read every article that I read. The ones that are important ones, I make sure that they're in there, and I also tell you what about the Zoom calls that are happening on a weekly basis. But as always, if you want to contact me, you can do so via social media, at Sean Callanan, at Sports Geek on most platforms, or you can try the old-fashioned way. No, not fax. Let's just go with email. Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. Before I get into my chat with Catherine Clark, CEO of Netball Queensland, just want to give you a quick update on the Sports Biz Zoom calls. Having a lot of fun on those calls. We have now got 5 different topics available for replay. So if you've missed any of the topics in the last 5 weeks, there are 10 calls there from the Tuesday night calls, which happen 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, which is my time, my part of the world. But that really does match up well for my friends in Europe and in South Africa. So it's around lunchtime. If you're in that part of the world, I'd love you to join those Tuesday night calls, those first calls. Love to get more people on those calls. So if you're in Europe, you're in London, you're in South Africa, and you're listening to this, please join us on Sports Biz Zoom calls. Or you can, if you're in the US market, in North America and Canada and the like, you can also join our Wednesday call, Wednesday 10 a.m. my time, but it'll be Tuesday around 5 p.m. PST for my friends in North America. So it's been really good. We've been getting around 20, 25, and I'd like to see that number lift on the Tuesday calls, but then getting regularly 30 to 50 people on the Wednesday calls. I'm doing my best to bring in podcast alumni, people who've been on the podcast before. People like Aaron LaValle, Colin Kelly, Stacey McGrain and Ned Coates, Pete Minio, Todd Cafflish, just to name a few. So it's great to have some podcast guests join, but I'd love to see you on those calls. Some of the topics we may have missed: stadiums and venues, redesigning sport in a post-COVID world, ticketing in 2021, millennials and sports, and then last week's topic, which was developing new fan bases. You can check out those replays at sportsgeekhq.com and watch them if you're a patron subscriber. Some of the calls coming up, I'm doing this as a bit of an announcement. We'll be covering some key themes across the digital dollars process. So this last tranche of Zoom calls, we've really dove in on specific topics and tried a different format, and I'm going to try it again, this time using our digital dollars process and workshops. So I'm going to try to make them a little bit workshopy, even a bit more interactive. So we're going to do digital dollars in reverse order because that's the focus that we're doing at the minute in this COVID world. So September 15, 16, we're going to do Know Your Pitch. Talk about how you pitch digital sponsorships. What are the key components, how people are doing it. Really looking forward to exploring that topic with everyone on the call. Then we'll also look at Know Your Value, understanding digital rate cards and valuing digital, and talking about how you go about putting value on your social assets and your digital assets, and again, how you explain them both internally, which is a really big point, but then also externally. September 29-30, we'll look at Know Your Distribution. So what are the platforms that are providing attention and value for you and your business and for your team and for your league? So we'll dive in on what are the hot platforms, how they're working, and how you're leveraging them and how you're growing them. So October 5-6, Know Your Content. I'm going to go through and discuss with everyone on the call how you go building out content franchises, and not only scoping out what they look like, but how do you make sure that they engage your fans and how they also engage your sponsors, how you can go about selling them. So again, tying it back to that Know Your Pitch. And then October 12 and 13, Know Your Audience. So we'll be diving in a little bit of the data side of digital fans. So how do I go about analysing social fans to identify audiences of opportunity, but also audiences that we are engaging with, that we can engage with more, which again frames pieces like what is the content you're going to develop. So I'd love for you to join us on these next 5 calls, but also check out the replays as you might do as a Patreon supporter. You can become a supporter of Sports Geek Patreon by going to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. Still and happy to give a shout out to some new Patreon subscribers, supporters, Sam O'Hearn, Pierre Gauthier, and I'm saying your name right, Pierre, but thank you very much for being a supporter. Beck Brun, thank you very much for coming on board as a Patreon supporter. And Dino Dipiamenico, a podcast guest and a good mate of mine, thank you very much for upgrading your sponsorship to a silver supporter. I really do appreciate it. Check out the podcast I did with Dino, and also check out his businesses, DMC Sport and Ella Korea. Really do appreciate it, Dino. There's plenty of ways for you to be a member. You can do it as a personal supporter for as little as $4 a month or whatever you want. If you're a regular to Sports Biz Zoom, there's a specific tier for Sports Biz Zooms to say, hey, I'm turning up to the Zooms and really getting value out of it. If you're a startup that want to gain visibility, there's an option for you. And then if you're a business that want to reach a Sports Geek audience, there is also an option for you. So for those of you who have signed up as a Patreon supporter, I really do appreciate it. It's very humbling to see a little notification come through on my Patreon app. I really do appreciate it. So if you like the podcast, if you like the newsletters, if you're enjoying the Zoom, I'd really appreciate the support. It goes a long way. It helps me know that it's the content I'm producing is valued and makes me want to keep producing content for people who keep supporting me. Now, let's get into my chat with Catherine Clark. She is the CEO of Netball Queensland. Very happy to welcome Catherine Clark, CEO of Netball Queensland. Welcome to the podcast, Catherine.
Thank you, Sean. Good to be here.
First of all, before we get into everything that's happening in netball in Queensland, because it's a very busy time for you right now, I want to go back a little bit and ask you, how did you get your intro and break into the world of sports?
So I've been playing sport for as long as I can remember, and primary school was my big pickup because I was fortunate enough to have a teacher, and Judy Reid, her son he became the Australian hockey captain.
Okay.
So she wasn't a bad person to have at your school.
Yep.
I had no family involvement, but I started to play hockey. I could run fast on an athletics track. She said, have you tried hockey? She put a stick in my hand, and that actually took me around the world. So I went from playing here in Queensland to playing in Holland, in the Netherlands, and that opened my eyes to the fact that you could actually earn a living in sport. And back then, although we won lots of medals in hockey, you didn't see the business of sport because they weren't paid. We had a very transactional sport where you would go and play your game and leave. You wouldn't stay where there was a coffee shop or the professional league wasn't there. And then I went to Holland and I could watch Ajax, and even my hockey club was sponsored by Heineken. They had a bar and a cafe. People hung around. It was a thriving business, and it just blew me away that, hey, you could actually work in sport. And when I came back to Australia, I kind of had that in my mind of how different it was, and wouldn't it be amazing if we could be part of that over here? And then my first paid job in sport was I actually went over to New Zealand, and I spent 10 years living in New Zealand. I worked for Sport and Recreation New Zealand, started off as a policy advisor, and then ended up managing the government's investment in junior sport and working with lots of NSOs. It was a vertical learning curve. I think I had 4 promotions in 6 years. And I am forever grateful for being adopted by my Kiwi friends over there. But that was amazing, and that led into a pathway of accidental CEO roles.
So you went from Sport New Zealand to gym sports to Gymnastics Australia, and then working in some Queensland government. So do you think all of those different roles gave you that well-rounded view of what a CEO needs from a sports org or any org for that matter?
I think you're absolutely right. I think for one, starting off as a player, and a player who went through a pathway, so you get identified, you play representational sport, then going over and being relocating your life to get paid, and that's an experience. Then working in government, I took up my first board role in an NSO at 26, first CEO role at 28, and I'd sat on both sides of the table. And it's funny you say that, because when you're in government and you're working with NSOs, you're providing advice because you're investing taxpayer dollars. And then you go and sit on the other side of the table, and I can tell you now, you know about 20%. You get on the other side of the table, you've got an elected board, you've got in gymnastics, a vast membership base, you've got an Olympic code. There is so much to learn that when you're in a funding agency, you don't realise how general your skill set needs to be and how much stakeholder management there is. And then New Zealand being what I underestimated, the cultural difference. New Zealand was a fantastic place for me to learn and grow because they're so innovative. They're a small country that needs to adapt quickly in order to stay at that cutting edge, to be, winning in everything from rugby to cycling. And then you come back to Australia, and we perceive that, we are far better and know more because we're the big brother. And actually, I think we could look over the ditch and learn a lot.
Yeah, definitely. So that finds you in the role at Netball Queensland from 2015. And for those who don't know, Netball Queensland is an NSO, but it's more than that. You're a person that wears many hats in that role. What does Netball Queensland? What are all the components of your remit at Netball Queensland?
Yeah, so we're not an NSO, we're not a national sports body, but we are a peak body. We're a state sports
SSO,
body.
My apologies.
Yeah, I don't want to be claiming things I'm not. Can't add to the federated politics, Sean. But I think even that's been interesting because I was the CEO of an NSO, lived in Melbourne, and now I'm in the federated model in the middle. And I can tell you now it's a different perspective.
Definitely.
But we're also a professional club. We have the Queensland Firebirds. And that certainly was something that enticed me to the role in the first place. And then last year we became venue managers. So we, I think on day 3 back in January 2015, Rosalie Jenke gave me my challenge to get her a venue. The Queensland Firebirds, being the most successful team in that ANZ Championship, were nomadic. They had no fixed abode and trained in all kinds of venues, which blew me away. And we started the journey to get what is now the Queensland State Netball League, aka Nissan Arena. Currently the centre of the universe for netball.
Yeah, it is in netball in this part of the world, definitely. So that offers a whole bunch of both challenges and opportunities. So how has, and I want to talk a little bit about your plan for netball. How has that changed from when you first stepped in the role to your latest plan, that you rolled out to say this is the plan for netball now that we've got some of these key assets? How has that journey been over the last 5 years?
Yeah, it's been epic for me as a non-netball person. And I think actually that was instrumental. We couldn't get out of our own way. The politics of sport, we'd been through 5 CEOs in 7 years before me. And we needed to evolve. And that's always a really uncomfortable process, particularly as you would know, sports professionalising. How do you respect and take what's great in your traditions but actually respect them by evolving and staying relevant. And that has been the biggest challenge and priority for me. We evolved our constitution, changed the kind of business structure that we have. We've moved from a $5 million turnover to a $13 million turnover. We've had to professionalise our sort of staff and our approach to our business. But, you know, we are a massive sport. We've clipped over 102,000 participants just in Queensland. We have 320 odd clubs who are part of 79 associations. So we have a very big footprint. And so leading change with a volunteer workforce, you know, that's an art of its own in how you bring people with you. What do you change? What do you leave? And celebrate and just try and grow. But at the same time, we had to find ourselves a home. And we were the last state in Australia to get a home of netball. And I think that's probably a bit about the track record here, Sean, but also the next journey is the priority of women's sport beyond, you know, lip service and getting in media is actual looking at the economics of women's sport and how financially sustainable it is, and are sponsors investing rather than just, you know, saying they are partnering, which is fantastic. But if we're going to continue to grow and thrive, you know, and the next frontier for me is pay parity for female athletes. We absolutely need to grow the economy of women's sport. So a bit of it was housekeeping at the beginning.
Yep.
Making sure that we were, you know, I couldn't get a P&L when I first arrived.
Yep.
We had some housekeeping to do. We're on a business transformation journey to make sure that we continue to remain relevant, that we reduce the admin for our volunteers in our role as a state sporting body. We've picked up 2 premiership wins with the Firebirds in 15 and 16, and we're in that phase now of building our roster and our list with the aim of picking up another one in the next 2.
Yep.
And I think our strat plan has the title Netball United. And for me, that's a signal of what's to come. Yes, it's about the venue because we can bring all kinds of participants here. Netball, yes, but also volleyball, basketball. The Brisbane Bullets play out of here. But it's also for me about embracing indoor netball. So the different formats of our code, reinventing some opportunities for non-gendered netball. So not male, not female. We don't need a netball M. Yep. We actually are a sport based on its rules that could, I think, at both social and competitive level, transcend gender altogether. I'd love Brisbane 2032 games to include NetX, which is going to be our new product, which is genderless. It's best players on the court.
Okay. And do you think, you know, some of the, I guess, the work that you've had to do, like that housekeeping, which would have been your first couple of years in doing, making some of those changes, because change is hard, but now you've got some of those really good building blocks, and, you know, the venue is a good building block because it opens up revenue opportunities, which helps you, you know, professionalize the sport, bring more money into the sport, you know, non-netball revenue, which you know, is now on your P&L, which wasn't in your P&L 5 years ago. Do you think that sets up the path for, you know, new products like NetX and the like?
Absolutely. I mean, this is kind of 101 stuff. You've got to have your house in order, and in order to make the most of the opportunities to grow, you've got to have the ability to service a large membership. We are a member-based organisation, and some of your listeners would probably, their eyes would go into the back of their head if I told them we have about 100 votes on the floor of an AGM.
Yep.
We have that federated model, and it's how you engage those people, which can become a force to be reckoned with because they bring so much experience, but how at the same time we can operate more like a social entrepreneur. And I'm spending more and more of my time listening to startup podcasts and, you know, blitzscaling by Reid Hoffman and things like that, because we need to move with the times. We need to be agile, and we've been implementing agile for the last 5 years. And it's such a break from tradition, but it means that you can take the ideation phase of something like NetX, Netball United, walking netball for our older adults, and we can implement them using principles and growth strategies that come out of entrepreneurship. So our challenge now is kind of this blended workforce. We're getting more commercial monetized participation streams where you can pay coaches, you can pay officials, and people are really valuing the experience. So they're happy to pay for that, which is, I think, what's happening across sport and rec, moving away from purist volunteer workforces where people are happy and parents can volunteer 20 hours a week. They can't. And actually, they're quite happy to pay for a coach to have a great experience for their kids. We're in this transition phase, and I know it's not just netball, but certainly having a venue, you can see that it's fast-tracking parts of our business where that transformation's occurring.
And the thing is, as a sport, you need to adapt to that, of the changing need of the consumer and of the people looking for the sport, to go the years of, my daughter plays netball at this time of the year and someone has to do all the work and it not be paid, because you're competing against all the other sports that are popping up and making it easily consumable, easy to pay for, and a total experience. That's why sports like netball, have to move with the times to be able to offer that service to customers, and that's what, and fans, but participants in particular, to say this is the type of experience they want. And you're right, there's money flowing through those different products that are being offered across sport.
Absolutely, you're 100% right. And I think that end-to-end, which you kind of flagged there, how you register. Is it on a mobile device? Like, have you even got simple things like your website? Is it mobile friendly or mobile first? I heard a stat last year that was across Australian sports, NSOs and the like, we're investing about 1% in digital. Australia is really undercooked, and I usually spend time each year in America just because I get so energized by watching the speed of change over there and that entrepreneurship and professional clubs. What we're doing here is we're transitioning our scoring of the game through to competition management and participant registration all onto a mobile-first app, which means that, Sean, if you had kids that were playing and you're in COVID, so you're trapped in Sydney, you could live stream, your daughter's club game. You could watch the score ticking over, but you can also manage, competition registration for state age or whatever it might be. Meanwhile, as a sport, we're offering our local clubs the abilities to sell advertising space to derive a commercial revenue. But at the end, we're engaging parents, caregivers, putting our sport online live. So you can watch those live scores of your Saturdays. This is the space we absolutely need to get into. And then there's the Firebirds. So, we're building at the moment a online fan tool. So, there'll be more to come on that one soon. That's one of those topics I can't talk about. But
that's all right.
This is, the digital appetite. COVID has just fast-tracked the opportunities, and it's presented us with, one, what is your core business, and what are the things that you can afford to stop? So it's, the sort of war of attrition and that survival. But secondly, I think for Australian sports, it has put us in a position where we can no longer defer this digital transformation. We've got to embrace it and leverage it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've seen a couple of jokes around the same thing. Who led digital transformation? Unfortunately, for a lot of sports and businesses, COVID has, right? Which is a byproduct of it. But the advantage and the opportunity for SSOs, when you say, here's all of our players, here's all the people in our ecosystem, like moving that from paper and people to digital, then it opens up that commercialization option from a sponsorship point of view, because yes, you can, at the very top, you can be engaged with the Firebirds at the elite level, but also we can connect you digitally to all of everyone from a fan to a player. That's the massive opportunity for sport, because brands are going to want to align with people with great values that can show that we can connect you with that fan or participant.
Absolutely. And I think that's been the domain of the big sports like AFL and cricket and league for quite some time. For me, it's like the sleeping giant. Netball is huge. It has this amazing footprint, and we keep getting told, it's straight to the household decision maker. You've got mums who played. We're getting more and more boys playing each year because there is, less risk of concussion and various other things that parents are concerned about. The rules of the game, can't hog the ball. You can only hold it for 3 seconds. You can't run with it. It means you have to play as a team. So if no one person can dominate and everyone will get a touch, if you're a parent looking at a product of where you want to spend your money to develop your child and their experience physically, but also as a team player, netball's a fantastic product. And we're about to go online, Sean. So for me, it's like waking the sleeping giant. We've had the scale of the other comp sports, but we've never really taken that scale online. Yeah. And I think for Netball Queensland, with the partnership with World Sport Action, which is for our digital platform for participant registration and live scoring, we're on the cusp of something pretty exciting. And I think sometimes change management, we get worried about people who've been in the sport for a long time. I can tell you now, we had Madonna, who's one of our life members, was here in the arena watching some netball, and she trains bench officials. She's probably been doing it for 50 years. Yep. And she said to me, our live scoring app is the best thing we've ever done because it's practically training all these people to score netball so she doesn't have to, and she can look up things on her mobile phone.
Yeah.
So I think we've got to give them an opportunity that if the solution is right, if the product market fit is right, taking it out of entrepreneurship, it'll work.
Yeah.
And as long as you communicate, involve those people who, you're literally standing on their shoulders because they've kept the sport going for decades, they will come with you. I think sometimes we have a bit of a negative approach to technology that we're going to lose those people. Well, I don't think that's always true.
Yeah. And the other thing I think with netball, like you've gone through a lot of change in your 5 years, but netball as a sport has gone through a lot of change and has accepted it. Like we are seeing a lot of sports that are getting disrupted and being forced to change, from a COVID point of view. But, the elite tier of netball has gone through a vast change from ANZ Championship to Suncorp Super Netball. Do you think the netball community is just ready to go? Like you said, when you're getting, scorekeepers that have always done it with pen and paper going, I can do it with mobile. Do you think they're very much accepting and ready to go with because they've had so much change and haven't had as much resistance that you might see in a more traditional sport? They're like, no, I always want my footy on a Saturday afternoon, and it's like being resistant to change?
I think it's highlighting that we're a sport of two breeds at the moment. I mean, we have been, you're right, we went to Suncorp Super Netball and we've adapted the 2-point shot. I mean, that was introduced with 2 weeks before the league started. And that's been a real dividing decision, but we've moved on and we've gone with it. And we're very fortunate with the playing group that we have at the moment, just how they get on about their business. It's quite exceptional. I think that in general, yes, we're good at change. I think if netball can continue to evolve and embrace it, it will be the most important part of our armoury because it's not going to stop. But I won't say it's easy. And we have a lot of long-serving volunteers particularly who will quite openly say they don't like change. They don't want it to change. However, I think that there is enough impetus and enough passion for the game that they'll embrace that change and come along for the journey.
So change takes leadership. I was looking at your LinkedIn earlier today. You were talking about vertical leadership and how much you want to do that as yourself, but also with your exec team. Do you want to explain, I guess, some of the concepts and why that's important to you?
Yeah, it's funny. Vertical leadership, we highly recommend it to people. It's a bit of a different way of looking at things. And, one of the sort of examples we've been talking about recently, looking at leadership growth, they focus on heat experiences. And you can look at your own journey and you probably get your biggest growth trajectories out of either stuff that goes wrong or taking a big leap of faith. So for me at 20, going to the other side of the world, I'd never been out of Australia and I moved to Amsterdam.
Yep.
That was pretty, I don't know how my mum lived with it, firstly, because I've become a mother now and I just don't know how she did it.
Yeah.
Apparently I was very good and I was boring, so she thought it'd be fine. But coaching in a different language, and I had to coach everyone from 6-year-olds through 35-year-old men, and I was 20. you have to rise. And if you've got that growth mindset, the heat experience that vertical leadership Nick Petrie talks about, that's where your fortitude comes from. Those are the moments that make you lift and you find that you've got capacity or capability that you didn't even know you had. COVID is one of those where, I was thinking I'm a believer that you don't have, CEOs particularly should not overstay their welcome because you become the problem.
Yep.
And 5 years, loads of change, and literally my job's just changed with getting a venue. But COVID, the environment, leading a bunch of people through huge uncertainty where literally on a daily basis you have 4 or 5 changes to the things that you're the factors that you're making decisions based on. It's brought everything in, and the pressure, are we having a season? Are we not? Are we having an SSN season? Are we not? How do we financially get through this? What are the mental health tolls?
Yep.
How do we decentralise our workforce and maintain productivity? For us, that's where moving to Agile a while ago has been, it's just proven that this transformation journey we're on to is absolutely critical. It's set us up for success. And in that way, this is one big heat experience. And if we can encourage our people to look at crisis as an opportunity to go back to your core business, to focus on what's really important, to grow and seek out the opportunities like digital, being one of those, you're going to have the biggest growth out of those moments versus when we're sitting in a conference or, in a moment of comfort.
Yeah.
I think so. For us, it's about embracing it, not being overwhelmed by it, but trying to really focus on the heat being a way of growth and stimulating growth. So
as you said there, we're all experiencing this giant heat experience, to use your words, in COVID and the challenge that it presents. What has it been like to talk about SSN, Super Netball, for those who don't know, which is the professional comp here in Australia, which the Firebirds are part of? SSN is a different business model than other sports, where the TV money drives the sports, and that's how it's driven. So we've seen the AFL and NRL adapt to, we've got to get the footy played and get it on the TV. SSN has been a different model and a successful model. What was it like trying to, decide whether it, going to happen, and then 2, how can we do it in a safe manner? And obviously you're in the middle there, must have been hard, keep putting your hats on and off. Like, I'm talking as the Firebirds now. By the way, I've got an arena. By the way, I also want to look after my players. What was that? Guessing it was a multitude of weeks to decide, hey, how can we do it? What do we do? What was that heat experience been like? Because it's not completed. It's still currently happening.
Yeah, about halfway through. And, one of those things that we're just wary of now is the fatigue amongst our people. So we normally, to put it in context for your listeners, we would normally deliver 7 games in a season. We're delivering 34. And we're doing double headers on a Tuesday, double headers on a Wednesday, double headers on a Saturday, and double headers on a Sunday. So just from a workforce point of view, it's pretty epic, and it's going to put everything to the test, which is great. If you look at it from the heat experience point of view. I think that what was really important at the beginning here, which I'm proud that we did, was, and I think the choice as a leader is that I'm a good wartime leader. I'm probably not a good peacetime leader. I'd become problematic because I'd try and fix stuff and, tinker. But wartime leadership, when you're decision, making quick decisions and then adapting, the key thing is to try and deal with the uncertainty. So SSN has been one of those with the 8 clubs and the league, where those hats became a challenge but also an opportunity because we could host. So we had about, 4 scenarios running the whole time. It was huge for everyone in terms of hours. We were having teleconferences every day, working out how to financially get ourselves through. To your point about broadcast, we don't have money coming down into the clubs from a rights deal, and that makes it really difficult. But one thing netball is profoundly good at is running on the smell of an oily rag, and the goodwill and commitment really came to the fore. We were having a home and away season until the Victorian second wave occurred. And then even the 3 days before our first game on August 1, we were having 2 games on the Saturday. The Chief Health Officer determined that Greater Sydney region was a COVID hotspot.
Yep.
And then we had 4. And then the borders got closed. And so I think that iterative planning, that agile kind of approach allows you to take those in your stride, regular communication, that kind of wartime leadership where you establish a rhythm of constantly looking at the terrain, adjusting, your sails depending on what's happening, keeping your staff. We have a tiger team, to use a NAFTA term. So our tiger team meets every day to just stay on top of constant changes. The fixtures being released in little bundles, that's just a challenge we have to accept because we can't plan too far in advance. So a lot of cooperation. It comes down to, really good, clear leadership and communication, working with your stakeholders. We've got about 4 or 5 SSN staff based here now at Nissan Arena. And where I think today another chunk of our fixture will be released. It's learning to accept uncertainty and work within it, because that's the only way we've been able to stay sane.
Yeah,
and vertical.
but I guess that's the again, both kudos for getting the season away, continuing to get the season away, and then also to have key partners of netball, being side by side, supporting netball. It is just going to, I guess, for me, solidify and set netball up in the future. How do you now, as we're, I'm currently joking that we're going to do a Sports Biz Zoom call trying to figure out what sport looks like in 2030, right? Which is 10 years away, which seems ridiculous in the middle of a pandemic. Are you trying to see what might happen post-COVID when we don't know when post-COVID comes? Like, how far ahead can you look?
Yeah, well, you can't really, can you? Because how long is this going to go around? And is there more waves to come? I think, going back to what is your core business and having to make some tough calls around that, our delivery model in general is based on the aggregation of as many people as you can into one space, usually indoors.
Yep.
Whether that's a coaching clinic, a Firebird school holiday clinic, or a game, we have to work out a way of operating where those parameters are not possible. And so taking our coach education online, we've done that. It just drives that further. And in a state as big as Queensland, that's just common sense.
Yeah.
But we've managed to push through the discomfort of having to do it online, which initially people don't want to do because they get used to it being, face-to-face. As a general rule, I always say the longer the term of your strategic plan, the less likely the assumptions that underpin it hold true.
Yeah.
So in a COVID environment, I think we're looking at sort of 12 months. You can stargaze, and that's cool. I love it. I'd love to do franchising like they do in Seattle and having our fans, digitally basically coach a team.
Yep.
There's all kinds of tech, sport, integration that we are stargazing about. But the reality for us at the moment is that once we have a good debrief at the end of this year, Queensland has been very different in the impact versus Victoria.
Yep.
So as a general rule across Australia, I don't know if we can fully understand what that fallout's going to be, because a lot of Queenslanders are acting like nothing's really happening.
Yeah.
They're still able. Our fans, we're the only club in the entire league that's been able to give its fans, its members, ticket to every game.
Yeah.
So we're kind of in a privileged position. But there are definitely trends that you've already touched on, things like the digital integration, delivery of things that would normally happen face-to-face. Even if they can, they might not in the future.
Yeah.
We might do our AGM online every year, Sean, because we don't need to fly people in from all over Queensland. I think we've learned our biggest one is that we've made a conscious decision not to bring everyone back to the office for our workforce.
Yep.
That we're now using this as the catalyst to have a decentralised working from home workforce.
Yep.
We don't want to return to anything. It will be working what drives productivity, what's helping our staff manage work-life challenges. So there are parts of our business which we have no intention of going back to anything, that we'll use COVID as that line in the sand, that we want to do it differently.
Yeah, and especially if you are finding things that, either has been forced by COVID, but they're actually better. Like it's a better outcome. Like having more people turn up to your AGM because they're like, oh, I can't fly to Brisbane, I can't go. It's like, well, that's okay. We figured out that it all works on Zoom, or it all works on Google. So that's one of the advantages. Checking
into your venue is another one.
Yeah.
The technology, when I went over to Golden State and you're talking about the technology they have around fan engagement and, procurement for the amount of inventory you buy in for F&B, they've been sort of using that in a non-COVID environment. COVID's enabled us to, through checking in, to work out processes and systems that we could then leverage later on and bring in.
Yeah, completely. Like that's the thing, the paper ticket, God bless it, most likely it's gone, right? And we can just say, sorry, there might be germs on that paper ticket. We're going completely digital, and everyone accepts it. Whereas 8 months ago, people would have fought for the piece of paper, sentimentally and all that kind of thing. And, as someone that has a whole bunch of tickets myself, I understand that, but it accelerates that piece, what we were saying before. I want to finish off with the Sports Geek closing five. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
That would be thoroughbred racing at Doomben with my dad.
Okay. Your dad was a big racing fan. Were you into the horses, or was it just?
He's still a thoroughbred breeder.
Yeah.
So we were taken to the track at 4 or 5 a.m. to watch track work, and then Doomben, the bookies, all that. The hats. That's something that I was exposed to at a young age, and then. Depending on the level of sport you're talking about here, Sean, my brother-in-law's GPS rugby at Ballymore.
Okay. Oh, terrific. Like I said, no one can ever Google that answer. So whatever you say is going to be correct. But you would have been to a lot of sports events, both in your life as an athlete, but then also as a CEO. Do you have a favourite food memory at a sports event that you'd like to share?
I think my favourite was actually I went to a Golden State Warriors game last year, and I loved popcorn, and they have everything's massive over there. Like there's these massive, big Golden State Warrior popcorn bins, and I had one at the Timberwolves, I think it was, the hockey up in Minneapolis.
Yeah, Minnesota Wild. Yeah.
They were wild too, can I just say. That was a wild event. But two of my all-time favourites, and both involve popcorn.
Okay. Well, it's to each their own. Like the food experience definitely has changed from the just the pie with sauce and the cups of tea and coffee to all the gourmet options that are now available. What's the first app you open in the morning?
Well, I have a rule that I don't open technology. I go for a run at 5 a.m. every morning.
Yep. So does that mean it's Runkeeper or Strava or something like that?
No, nothing at all. No tech. Just me on the road for an hour. Yep. That sets my agenda for me rather than looking at something and letting something else set it. But the first one would then be in the car. I listen to Masters of Scale religiously.
Terrific. So who do you suggest the podcast listeners should follow that you follow, and why? It might be a podcast, like you said, Reid Hoffman's Masters of Scale is a good podcast, but have you got another suggestion for people to check out?
Currently, I am loving Mike Maples Jr.
Okay.
I think his podcast's called Starting Greatness.
Starting Greatness. Okay, I might check it out.
Floodgate as well is his company, but he's fantastic, and you've got short bits that you can listen to, or you can look up his documents. They're also great, but that entrepreneurship space, Mike Maples Jr.
Mike Maples Jr. I have not heard of him. I will check him out. Lastly, and this is one where you can put your Netball Queensland or your Firebirds hat on, and you also answer it personally. So what social media platform is your MVP?
Well, it depends on what I'm looking for.
This is not a sit on the fence kind of thing. I don't want 3 different answers for types of mood. Like you're going to a deserted island and you've only got one platform.
WhatsApp would have to be where I'm at with all the groups that we are chatting with, Event Day,
Yep.
Friends, people from all over the world that I've done like leadership courses with. We use WhatsApp to stay in touch, and then on game day here, everything's on WhatsApp. So currently, I couldn't live without that. So
okay, and then from a Firebirds point of view, what do you think? What's that?
The Netball Live app is the only, because we're not allowed to have team apps, Sean.
Okay.
So the Netball universe is on Netball Live, and I'm a stats person. Yep. So I live in the match centre on Netball Live.
Terrific. Last but not least, where can people find or connect with you on the internet? Where's the best place?
LinkedIn.
If someone wants LinkedIn, find yourself on LinkedIn. Please tell Catherine that you have listened to the podcast and you enjoyed it, and that you look forward to going to a netball game when travel restrictions allow. Because that's pretty much what I have to say to everyone these days, because I haven't been to sport in 4 months and I'm starting to get the shakes.
I know.
Thank you very much, Catherine, for your time. All the best for the rest of the season. Stay safe in your part of the world, and hope everything, touch wood or whatever I have to do to make sure the season gets through. But all the best for the rest of the year.
Thanks so much, Sean, for having me.
Find out more about Sports Geek's Digital to Dollars process at digitaltodollars.com. We'd love your support on our Patreon campaign. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon.
Thanks again to Catherine Clark. Please reach out to Catherine on LinkedIn. The links will be in the show notes, but you can look up Catherine Clark. That is Clark, CLARK. That will become why I'm spelling Clark will make sense when you find out who my next guest will be. Or you can send her a tweet, @CClark_sport. Please reach out to her if you have not connected with her. It's very, as you can tell, if you just listen to the interview, absolutely savvy operator in the sports business space, doing some great things in the world of netball. Please connect. Give her your feedback on this on the chat. I love seeing people connect with podcast guests and give them some feedback directly. It's great getting feedback from podcast guests a couple of weeks later to find out who they've connected with and some of the feedback they've got from around the world. So I really do appreciate it. Before I wrap up this podcast, so I did mention recently the titled Sports Geek Avengers Project. Again, shout out to Marvel and Disney until they tell me to stop using that term. And I'm using it as a homage. I spoke about the Sports Geek Avengers Project as a way to describe what I'm trying to do in the sports space is to try to bring quality people together that have potentially been pushed out of the world of sport due to COVID. I think there's a real opportunity to bring some really talented people together. And that's what I'm doing with different people, talking to different people and trying to find and source projects that fit the skill set of the people that I'm getting in touch with. So it comes from two sides. If you're one of those person that has been pushed out of the world of sport, please reach out to me. I put up a post on LinkedIn. I've been lucky enough to work in multiple industries and jump from industry to industry, to go from IT to all of sport. Took a little bit of work, but lucky enough to understand what it's like transitioning into a new role and redesigning and redefining yourself if you want to look at a new career. So I've had some great feedback on that LinkedIn post, but also I want to talk to people who are trying to figure out what is next. I've, like I said, been through that multiple iterations, but I do think there is some opportunities there for us to team up in some way. And likewise, if you are on team side, league side, and you are restructuring what your business looks like and how you are going to still satisfy your fans, deliver for your sponsors with a restricted resource base, please, I'd love to have a chat, because there are some really talented people out there, and I think there's some really good opportunities to match up the two. So please reach out, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. whether it's around digital or commercial or content production or marketing, ticket sales, sponsorship campaigns, the stuff that I've been doing and that my team's been doing, but also in that wider space, because this has, the industry has been affected across multiple departments. So I'm talking to a lot of different people. And then additionally, I've opened up what I'm calling office hours, which is opportunity for a chat. If you're in a tough spot, trying to figure out what's next in your career or breaking into the sports industry, which has now got tougher than ever, I'm offering a few spots in my calendar to have those calls one-on-one with people to help people get back on their feet. So you can go book in a time for that, sportsgeekhq.com/office hours. If I can help you get back on your feet, I'd really love to, and I'd really love to be supporting people who've supported me. You as a podcast listener have been supporting me for many years. If I can help you in any way, let me know. So they're the main things. They're the main calls to action at the end. My motto is still the same. I still want to work on big problems. 2020 has offered up a lot of big problems. So please reach out, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. If there's a big problem that you want to help solve. If I can't solve it, the good thing is with things like the Sports Biz Zoom and staying connected with people via LinkedIn, there's every chance that I know someone that might be able to help you. So go to Sports Geek HQ. There's a lot of big buttons there to either chat, organise a time for a phone call. If you're a sports tech or a solution provider of the world of sport and you think you can help sport find a way out and find solutions that are needed, the pre-production for the Sports Geek Amplify series is starting to kick off. If you want to be involved in that, please check out sportsgeekhq.com/amplify. And I'd love to see you on the next Sports Biz Zoom calls by Simply RSVP. You do that every single week, and I really do appreciate the people that have been doing it. Passing 600 people attending those Zoom calls, absolutely amazing, and blown away by the support and the camaraderie and the collegial nature of the group. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/Zoom calls to RSVP. Until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
We'd love your support on our Patreon campaign. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. Want to help drive more revenue from your digital efforts? Book a time for a call. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call.